This time on Rad Rat Video, we talk about indoor skate parks, we talk about concavity, and we talk about whether skateboarding is really an art. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, the channel we can learn something new about skateboarding 3 times a week. We do stuff like answering your questions on Ask Rad Rat. We talk about different games that are based on skateboarding. We learn new tricks. We do documentaries on your favorite skaters, all kinds of stuff like that. Today I'm answering some questions. Let's get into it. The first one is from Kurt Venom Mitchell, who says, "Hi, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about indoor skate parks. I can see how difficult it is to make money off of a skate park without charging outrageous rates after taking into consideration the employees, rent, electric, heating, paying for all the ramps. It has always been a dream of mine to open an indoor skate park somewhere in Colorado where it snows in some of the year. There's just nowhere to skate outside. Any opinions or general topic coverage would be greatly appreciated." Well, I want to wish you the best of luck on doing that. There's going to be a lot of obstacles to overcome. One of the biggest things is how many public parks there are now. So I also live in Colorado. I'm in Fort Collins. There's 4 skate parks in town, one that's right across the border in the next town, and there's ones in all the other towns as well. It's really easy to find somewhere to skate for free. Not even counting street, just skate parks. There's a ton of them. And it's going to be really difficult to compete with that. And yes, it does snow here, but snow will be on the ground for a couple of days. It'll be up to 60 every few days anyway. So if you want to build a business off of being able to thrive for 20 days over the whole season where you can't skate outside, I think that's going to be really, really difficult. So the way that this could possibly work is if you find a place that doesn't have public skate park, that doesn't have easily available free skateboarding, and so maybe in the mountains somewhere, you find, somewhere in the mountains where there's not a lot of skating, but there's a lot of stuff to do, like touristy places, you might do okay. But the other thing is that you'll have to cater to scooter kids. It just is how it is. No one wants them there, but as the owner, you want to have a ton of kids there paying money to be able to skate. So you'd have really basic obstacles, like really small stuff, like a little 2-set, like really basic stuff. You have to sell scooters in your shop, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's going to be really difficult. I don't know if you can really do that here, but if you do, let me know. I'll come check it out, and I wish you the best of luck. The next question is from Jimmy Garrett, who asks, "Why is the degree of concavity generally not listed for decks on mail-order sites and catalogs? As someone that loves steep concaves, I think it's just as important as width, wheelbase, and length. While there are some patterns amongst deck companies, like Girl and Chocolate Decks being very mellow, it is still a guessing game much of the time. The only reason I can figure is that since shapes are so varied, it might be tough to come up with a universal grading system for deck concave. A deck with all its little nuances really doesn't lend itself to being described by discrete data points, but we somehow figured out how to land men on the moon. I think we as a species should be able to come up with some sort of solution here." And I think you are definitely on the right track with it being difficult to describe in one number. And I recently went through this process. So I designed a board with open source skateboards. I'm going to make a whole video on what the process is like and what all the numbers mean and how it all works. But so like how round the tails are. I went with a really low number so it's more squared off. Simple. How long is the wheelbase? Simple. It's just a number. How wide is it? Simple. The only thing I got really confused on was the concave. And the reason why is because it's measured in like how big the circle would be if the board kept going, like how curved it is versus how steep it is. So how curved it is going to depend on how wide the board is. If you use the exact same mold to press an 8.0 and an 8.5, the 8.5 will be steeper because it has more width to get further along the curve. And so how does that measure up? Like, that's the exact same steepness. Does it feel steeper, or does it feel the same because you have more room to slide before you flick? How do you judge that exactly? That can be really difficult. And I think the only way it would work is if you had one number for how steep it is right at the edge. And that's not perfect because you could have like a really wide flat spot and then it curves up real quick, or you could have a really mellow curve. It's tough to say exactly how you would define all that stuff. But if it was the number of how steep it was at the end, that could work. It would just be weird because you could have a pro model pressed with the exact same mold. Everything is exactly the same, but if they're different widths, one will be steeper than the other one. And that just kind of is how it is. I think for a lot of people, just saying like steep, medium, and mellow is enough, but it would be nice to have that kind of number. One of the problems is like having to train everybody. You'd have to tell everybody what that number meant if you had like an online store, if you have a skate shop. You have to tell everybody what this new rating means and how it works and what some standards are and all that kind of thing. It's just really tough. I do think it's doable, but I don't know if it's important to enough people that will make that step. All right, the next question is from Zorlak, who says, "Hello, I was wondering if ollieing huge stairs in skate parks is getting out of style. So many parks these days don't seem to include them." I think you're definitely right. One of the biggest issues with doing giant gaps is that we've kind of gotten past the point where skateboard skill is the limit. Now we're more at the human limit. So I made a video about how big we could possibly go right there, and we're really, really close to it. You could ollie something a little bit bigger than we've done now, and that's about it. And so unless you're the gap guy and you've been training your whole life to absorb impact and you can jump down the biggest stuff in the world, yours isn't going to be that big of not a big contribution to skateboarding, right? So if someone did a ollie down 23 and you can do 18, that's amazing, but it's not as interesting to watch. Like, it's been done before, right? So it makes more sense for you to try to do something that you're really good at, something where you're closer to the best in the world. Maybe you can't ollie as big of a set as the next guy, but you might still be able to do the biggest backside flip ever done, something like that. Or maybe, you're going to get into doing stuff that's just more stylish and not worrying about how big it is as much, that type of thing. So it's just tougher and tougher to compete these days with height being the only thing. If you want to get into more categories and stuff, then it's possible. But I think that's why we're not seeing that quite as much. The last question is from Riley. My question is whether or not you consider aspects of skateboarding to be art. What do you think about skateboarding is least or most artful? Is it inventing tricks, doing them differently, or the way they play together in a line? And that's a really good question. I think it's hard to argue the fact that skateboarding in general is an art. There's a definition by an author called Scott McCloud that I like. He writes books about sequential art, comics, comic strips, storyboards, like that type of stuff. And his definition is this: any activity which does not have the primary purpose of survival or reproduction. And that's a really, really wide definition, but I think it makes sense. If you're like a caveman and to get food, you just go get food and you eat it, like that's not art because you're doing something you need to do to survive. But if you take that food and then you craft this fine meal and you get all these seasonings together and you come up with this dish that's not required for living, and so you've performed some art to make this happen. And if you are walking around the sidewalk, you see a couple rocks and you decide to place them like this instead of the way they were, that's art too, right? How much merit those different art forms have is a question we'll get to in a second. But the fact that skateboarding is an art is hard to deny. You're not doing anything that builds anything up for any purpose, right? You're not, it doesn't produce food. It doesn't make sure your children survive childhood. It doesn't do anything for your survival or your life. It's just something that you enjoy doing, something you can share with friends, and it definitely fits into the art category that way. And so you're talking about putting together a line, and I think that no matter what line you put together or how you do it, it is art, but not all art is good, right? So if you put together a line, you plan this out, you go out and you finally do it, you get it on film, you were pushing along, you did a kick flip, you landed and you kick turn a couple times, and then you set your back foot up, and then wait, you gotta push again, you're about to lose balance, and then you did a pop shove it, and then you landed it. Oh, did that line, right? That was art. You did design that thing, you put it together, that was your creation, but that doesn't mean it was the best art in the world, right? That was like the finger painting that you put up on the fridge from your kindergartner. But what is the most artful thing you could do on a skateboard is the question. And for me, in fine art, it would be creating something new. So like an abstract painting is more artful than a portrait, to me. That's debatable, obviously, but like even if it's a great portrait, if it's the Mona Lisa, it's still just, I looked at this and then I copied it. It took a lot of skill, a lot of talent to do that, but as far as like artistic thinking, it's not quite in the same league as creating a new thing, designing a new creature that doesn't exist and painting a picture of it. To me, that's more artful, even if it's not the same skill level. And so in skateboarding, I would say the most artful thing you could do is create a new thing, whether it's a new trick, which most of those are taken. At this point, creating something all new is pretty much impossible. You could figure out how to flip the board with this toe instead of this heel or something like that. But as far as creating something all new, I don't know if that's really a goal you can really attain to at this point. But creating a new way to skate an obstacle would be a great way to do it. You know, spinning around on a pole, the first time someone ever did that, I have a video about that right here, by the way, that was a new way to look at something. That was a new way to express yourself given tools that everyone already had, but you were the first one to come up with this way to do it. You know, stuff that Richie Jackson does, like doing a firecracker and then landing in tail stop and doing a kickflip out or something. That's a new way to do something that no one's ever thought of or no one's ever filmed. That type of stuff I think is the most artful. Of course, there's art, then there's skill, like we've talked about, but the question was about art. And I think creating is definitely the best way to add to the art of skateboarding. So that's my thoughts on that. Let me know what you think about that below. And if you have questions for next time, go to radratvideo.com and there's a form right on the homepage where you can submit questions. Go straight to my email and I'll try to answer it as soon as I can. Thank you for watching.